I'm Laura Murphy-Oates, and this is The Full Story. A few weeks ago, we sent a photographer down to Yuin country, also known as Gippsland, in northeastern Victoria.
So I'm just driving down this road that leads to Bruce Pascoe's property.
She was there to meet one of Australia's most celebrated authors.
I can see a lot of bush around me that has been burned. So the trees are blackened.
This past summer, Bruce found himself in the middle of two life-changing events.
Yet there is an immense amount of growth, a lot of green leaves just sprouting.
Today, how Bruce Pascoe rebounded.
And I'm almost arriving at the gate. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Bruce has been up to.
It's Wednesday, the 13th of May. Okay, Lorena, for people who haven't heard of him, who is Bruce Pascoe?
Bruce Pascoe is a writer who identifies as a Yuin man.
Lorena Allam is the Indigenous Affairs Editor at Guardian Australia.
He's the author of a book called Dark Emu, which is probably his best-known book, which is about, it uses the historical record to argue that Aboriginal people used complex forms of agriculture and fishing and weren't just hunter-gatherers.
Yeah, it's a pretty influential book. And for a lot of people, it seems like it's challenged the kind of simplistic way that Indigenous culture and knowledge has been portrayed in our history books and in our schools for a long time, right?
Yes. I think it was published in 2014, so it's been around for a long time, but only in the last few years has it gained this kind of following that has brought it to the attention of more and more Australians.
Hello.
Hi, good morning. How are you going?
Oh, pretty good, thanks.
And you spoke to him recently. Tell me about this. Where was he? How did this all come about?
What's the weather like this morning?
It's been our coldest morning. Bit of a frost in Genoa. We didn't quite get a frost here, but it's very cold, and I've got the fire going for the first morning of the year.
Bruce lives on a farm in one of the most beautiful parts of the country in the East Gippsland in Victoria, just across the border from Eden on the far south coast of New South Wales. And because we're all in lockdown, I spoke to him over the phone, and our photographer, Isabella Moore, went down to talk to him in person. They met while she was taking photos of Malakuta during the bushfires.
When Isabella came, I went to embrace her and said, no, we don't do that now. Of course, down here, we've kind of forgotten it a little bit because we are so isolated already.
And how did he seem when you spoke to him? How is he going in this pandemic?
Well, despite what's going on in the rest of the world, I think life for Bruce and his team at the moment is pretty peaceful.
We're kind of living in our own world out here at the moment. This is a very isolated farm, and we're isolated on it.
He said, we're being really careful, but we're so far removed from anywhere right now that we're just getting on with things.
Yeah, it is pretty good.
But really the pandemic is one of many challenges that he's faced in the last 6 to 8 months.
Okay, can you remind us about that? Tell us about what Bruce has been through over this past summer.
Well, like thousands of Australians, he was caught up in this summer's catastrophic bushfires.
8 fires are still burning at emergency levels.
Authorities have declared a state of disaster.
Stuck in stifling smoke, car after car choked in traffic. The Great Escape on a highway.
So a mass exodus is underway to limit the chance of any more deaths.
His farm is about an hour's drive outside of Malakuta in East Gippsland.
And that was a town that was evacuated by the Navy, right? They were hit really hard by the bushfires.
That's right. So Bruce was down there. That's where he lives. He's a volunteer with the Country Fire Authority, the CFA, in Victoria. So he spent his Christmas for weeks and weeks fighting fires all around the region.
The Malakuta fire was over and dusted in 4 hours. But on the margins, it just went on and on and on. The fire just crept slowly, thank goodness, because it meant that we could manage it to a certain extent. Not entirely, but to a certain extent. That's why I've still got a house.
They managed to save the house. He lost a few of his sheds.
But everything else was burnt.
People all around him lost their lives, lost their homes. He said, the people of Mallacoota will spend the next decade recovering. So it was very traumatic.
It was terrible. It was terrible. All the days sort of merged into one. Here I went for 5 or 6 weeks. Everyone was just racing around, trying to fight a fire here, fight a fire there. Save a house here, save a house there. Just went on and on and on. In some ways, this place changed its character during the fires, and yet a month later, people were surprised to hear that I'd been burnt out because of the recovery of the country.
And what else has happened to Bruce?
The other massive challenge he was facing was this increasingly vitriolic questioning of his writing, specifically Dark Emu, and also, some really serious questions about his identity.
Right. Can you remind us what this was all about? Who was doing this questioning and what questions did they have?
Right. Well, it came from a number of quarters, and it's. I'll have to break it down for people because it's a very messy sort of a story.
Now, look, I'm not picking on the guy. What I'm doing now is showing how our institutions will actually fight to the death against the truth that's staring them in the face. It's about Bruce Pascoe.
The Herald Sun commentator Andrew Bolt has been questioning Bruce's identity for some time, but also his scholarship.
Now, Pascoe himself has responded about whether he really is Aboriginal and whether his book is based on misquoted sources and basic inventions.
He's saying that Bruce has fabricated most of Dark Emu. He's got evidence to prove that Bruce is wrong, that he has misrepresented the historical record.
Intellectual rot of the decline of truth and the rise of an anti-Western fantasy sponsored with your money.
On top of that, a prominent Aboriginal businesswoman, Josephine Cashman, who had also been seriously questioning Bruce's identity, his Aboriginality, demanded the federal police investigate Pascoe for allegedly benefiting financially from claiming to be Indigenous. She had written to Peter Dutton, the minister, who then, over Christmas, in the midst of the bushfires, referred that letter to the AFP.
Okay, so in the middle of this fire crisis, you have 2 accusations being levelled at Bruce. One about the validity of his work and the other about his identity as an Indigenous man. And then this accusation ends up before the Australian Federal Police. What happened?
The AFP found that Pascoe's Aboriginality was not relevant to determining whether a Commonwealth offence had been committed, and so they closed the investigation. They said it was finalised, there was nothing more for them to do. But then the personal attacks by Cashman and Bolt seemed to intensify.
What did they do?
In late January, Andrew Bolt produced a letter purporting to be from Dr. Terry Yumbalul from the Northern Territory, who's a Warramiri man from Arnhem Land. And he denounced Pascoe in this letter, saying that, we were hunter-gatherers and this history is preposterous. Bolt published that letter in its entirety. Then NITV News, and specifically Jack Lattimore, did a bit of digging and discovered that the letter hadn't actually been written by Dr. Terry Yumbalul, the Warramiri elder from Arnhem Land. And then he appeared on NITV to say as much.
I did not say anything of a sort to write a letter on behalf of me.
You did not give her consent to use your name in any way?
There was never given a consent.
Are there aspects in the letter that you disagree with?
Yes, the whole lot of them.
Okay, so if he didn't write it, then who did?
Well, we still don't know who wrote it. We still don't know for sure where sections of it came from. NITV discovered that great chunks of it came from academic papers that had been published in the mid-1990s, word for word. Andrew Bolt has only said that the letter was supplied to him by Josephine Cashman, so it's a very murky situation.
Wow.
And because of Cashman's involvement in attacking Pascoe over several weeks, it had built to the point where the Indigenous Australians Minister Ken Wyatt asked her to step down from his senior advisory board. Josephine Cashman told the Sydney Morning Herald later that she helped Terry Umbull write the letter at his request, and she denied that anything underhanded took place.
This controversy, made headlines for months on end. Was there any substance to any of these claims, that from Josephine Cashman or from Andrew Bolt, as far as we know?
No, well, they haven't managed to effectively disprove what Bruce is saying in Dark Emu, because a lot of the work comes from the historical records. When it comes to the questions around his identity, it's much more complex. Presently, 2 out of the 3 First Nations that Bruce Pascoe says he descends from have gone public with written statements rejecting these claims, one nation in Victoria and one in Tasmania. However, the Yuin mob on the south coast have embraced him, and one of their most revered elders, Ozzy Cruz, has said he's one of us, and that's the end of it. For some people in this country, claiming their Aboriginal heritage is difficult because of so much disruption, because of poor record keeping, because of child removals, because of the stolen generation, because of dispossession and poverty and interruption of the way that our knowledge was transmitted. So this is not uncommon for people to struggle to find a connection to their identity. Ultimately, a question of who is and who isn't Aboriginal is a personal one, but it is also the right of nations, of First Nations, to determine, and it's not the business of Andrew Bolt or anybody else.
What does Bruce have to say about this whole experience?
Well, he said it was really, really tough.
It was hard for me, that period. I'm not trying to downplay it. I'm not trying to say I'm this kind of resilient character, because I'm not. It was the worst time of my life. But I was totally supported by the Aboriginal community. Not every Aboriginal person, obviously, because people tell me that social media was rife with other opinions. But basically the elders stuck by me firm, and some of them came down here. Some of them stopped me in the street to tell me to keep doing what I was doing. Some of them came up with new information about my family in order to support me. Stuff that had never occurred to them to talk about because they didn't think it was necessary, and suddenly they've gone, I actually know that family. This is probably important information now. And they've rung me up and told me, it was important.
But he said there were some good things to come out of it, like the land that has burnt all around him.
The country's rebounded, I've rebounded with it.
He's bounced back.
And I feel supported by the people and by the country.
Next, how this controversy fueled a new beginning. So Bruce is bouncing back. Can you tell me a little bit more about what he's been doing?
So Isabella went down to Bruce's place to document one of his new projects.
And we've got a grass here now that we're harvesting, and we're about a third, halfway through that harvest.
Which is to grow and harvest this native grass.
We're sort of inventing a process as we go to clean that seed so that we can convert it into flour.
It's called Mundadjang Nyaluk.
Mundadjang, Naluk, 2 words.
Which is a Yuin word for dancing grass.
We're calling it that because we want to call it by our name. not by a Western botanical name.
And they think that the harvest that they've done is probably the first time in about 200 years that Yuin people have harvested this grass for food.
We've learnt that it's bountiful. It's entirely pest resistant because it's, grows here. Root system is massive. This is why we think this is really important for Australian agriculture now, that a large root system like that is sequestering carbon but also holding the soil together and holding moisture in the soil.
And he says, in a way, the whole Andrew Bolt culture war has helped because...
I'd been trying to get, employ local Aboriginal people to work on the place, and at around that time, a few people said, I've left my old job, want to work on the farm, so we were able to collect 3 and then 4 people to work here. So we've been getting a lot done, but I'm employing these people here out of what I call the Bolt Vault.
The Bolt Vault. Yeah.
He said all the attention led to a boost in book sales, and he's been using that money to employ Yuin people to work on the farm.
When Andrew Bolt attacked me, a lot of Australians took it as a personal attack on them because a lot of people had read Dark Emu. So the same people went out, and the booksellers have been telling me some people bought 10 copies, and that they were their Christmas presents to other people. And so the sales boomed around that time, and so I was making money, and all of that money has gone into wages. We've got to buy machinery as well. Like we had to buy a welder the other day because the exhaust pipe on the tractor fell off, but one of the lads here is an untrained welder, and he fixed it for me, bless him.
So he uses that money to pay their wages, and he said that money...
Those wages then go back into Eden, and they're spent on the children at shops where the shopkeepers are battling their guts out to stay alive.
Goodness knows the South Coast needs all the economic support it can get. So he's saying,
I feel a lot of good has come out of it.
It's been a good thing that he's been able to spread the love. And in return, he and the Yuin people who are working on the farm are doing this incredible thing where they're trying to revive a very, very old form of farming in this country.
Mm. Okay, so tell me about this project. How does it all work? What is he doing?
Well, this is a very old property, and...
this grass has been here all along.
So the flora on the property is pretty intact.
It's been used as cattle fodder, but, mostly it's the kind of thing that pastoralists want to get rid of on their property.
But because of the fires, the exotic grasses were severely retarded by the fires, but the Australian grasses have rebounded, and so we're taking advantage of that rebound to harvest the seed.
So what they've been trying to do is harvest this grass, the dancing grass, and also some kangaroo grass, and working out how to do that because nobody, as I said, has done this for a very, very long time.
And what does that process involve?
Yeah, and to get the grass seeds is a pretty elaborate process. We're refining that as we go along. Well, this is grain that we harvested 3 or 4 days ago. What we're doing now, we've had it drying in the sun, then we're spreading the grain onto the top frame to get rid of the straw, always experimenting with it. Then we burn what's left so that the seed drops through onto the 3rd tier.
Burning nice now.
Hearing the grain come off the stem and the weight of the grain falling into the bottom of the box. We bring it back up again and we do the same thing again, so that was a big moment. We're trying to get as much seed out of it as we can. Such an unusual thing to work with.
Brush it all down into that lid, then we'll reburn it.
Using the flame, the seed's got a real toasty flavour to it. Using the burning, not just because it's one of the old people's ways, we're using it because it works.
And tastes better?
Thowie, that's bloody beautiful. You know, and the two things are exactly the same.
Like a toasty taste to it.
And it is, it is, yeah. Here we've got another process using 2 hard blocks of hardwood and grinding like that to get this awn off. Little tail, we've got to get rid of that little tail.
And run it back through, Thowie?
Yeah, wait for this stuff here. The 2 got to get all that from underneath.
Each time we've done it, we've done it a slightly different way. Like we said when we first started, the old people had 120,000 years to get this right, and we can't be disappointed if after day 8 we're still struggling.
Okay, so they're trying to recreate this ancient farming practice by trial and error. What are they actually making?
They made some bread.
We sat round this morning and we had bread from our own flour, which was a pretty moving time for us.
What type of bread?
Oh, it's beautiful bread. It's a really dark, rye-like flour.
If you go to our site, you'll see a photo of the bread.
Like, it fills you up really quick.
Terry Hayes, one of the workers on the farm, said it fills you up.
Like, you only probably need a sandwich of it, you know, and you basically just, you're full. It's totally different to buying bread in the shop, and it's nice with with honey on it and that. And I wouldn't mind tasting like a Johnny cake with it and damper. That'd be nice as.
He said it's a really rich sort of spicy flavour, and it's got a really distinct aroma.
Incredibly aromatic, but also very tasty.
And when I asked him what that smelt like, he said, oh, it's nothing, I can't compare it to anything that's around, but it's really powerful.
I was driving to Eden the other day to get some more materials for the farm, and I thought the hand sanitizer I was using must have been incredibly perfumed, but in fact it was the flour that I'd been handling. And
he really wants people to get used to the smell of it, because that would mean that we are reviving these native grasses.
People will become used to this smell in their houses. It'll be like, you know, how everyone knows what fried onion smells like. Everyone will soon know what this flour smells like. But it's a small amount of flour for an acre of land.
So they're not yielding a huge amount of flour, and they're still refining their processes as they go, because no one has done this for so long. It's a lot of, guesswork and a lot of experimentation. And he said it's a really emotional thing, because they're reconnecting with ancient practices that are still here, sort of embedded in the country.
But what I've been saying to farmers around the country is that if you don't pour chemicals on it, if you don't plough, if you don't have to plant every year, then there's no on costs. So whatever you get off the land is all profit. And a lot of farmers are looking at it like that now. They're looking at this as a way where they can be kinder to their land and still make a living. One farmer said to me, I'm making 2/3 as much money as I used to make, but my profit has doubled. And that's simply because of he's dropped his chemical bill to next to nothing.
There's this sort of regenerative farming movement that's now happening and taking shape. It's run by farmers themselves who are now on marginal land thanks to changes to our climate, by permaculturalists who want to live a more healthy and sustainable way on the land. So he's saying, there's this broad movement of people who want their kids to learn a more true history of the country, and that's what's happening here. And he's just part of that wave.
We have seen widespread destruction of land over this past summer by the bushfires. Do you think that's part of this upswell in interest, not just in the Indigenous community, but in the non-Indigenous community, in our land practices, in the way that we care for the land?
That's definitely true. A lot of people are now calling for Indigenous knowledges to be put at the forefront, long overdue, in the way that we manage country in the wake of those catastrophic bushfires, and saying that, maybe it's time, it's well past time as we know, to listen to the way that Aboriginal people manage fire. And Bruce is part of that movement in the sense that he's trying to revive ancient farming practices that may actually benefit the country and be sustainable in the long term. The challenge is, though, to be able to scale those up into a broader movement that could encompass a broader sort of farming community. And he's saying, bakers and foodies and restaurateurs have been writing to him saying, when you get your first batch of flour, we want to experiment with it, we want to cook with it.
Look, the demand for it is incredible. There's a bit of a groovy niche market for foods like this. We just can't supply. So we're, the flour that we're producing here is very precious to us.
I think that one of the passages in Dark Emu that, I found really fascinating, well, some of the chapters in Dark Emu that I found really fascinating was this depiction of the land before colonisation, talking about how the soil was different, there were fields of, these native vegetables and plants that were very quickly destroyed as colonisation rolled across the country. With this project, is Bruce trying to show that we can return to some of this, that it is not too late for our soil and our farming practices?
No, he said it's not too late, but it is easy to feel despair when you look at the state of the country. He said we're trying to recover these processes because in doing so we can recover the health of the country. In Bruce's book, Dark Emu, and in Bill Gamage's book, Biggest Estate on Earth, they both use quotes from the diaries of explorers who found the soil, once they got across the Great Dividing Range, to be so thick and rich that their horse hooves left deep divots in the ground. That's how good the soil was. But in a few short years, that was heavily degraded. So the country, as Bruce puts it, and many others say this too, is degraded. What these grasses can do is...
once they're in. You'll never, you don't need to do anything more about them. They're there forever.
Because they're perennial, once you put them in, that's it.
Our murnong, our tubers are perennial.
They have low needs for pesticides. They're low cost.
The things like the warrigal greens and the samphires and the water ribbons, they're all perennial.
There's a lot of farmers. He said, look, there's a lot of farmers on marginal land now, and they want some consistency. They want reduced costs, and these sort of perennial grains are a potential solution. He said, we need to... He's trying to show that we can heal the country. The country wants to heal, and if we are brave enough to experiment with these ancient ways of doing things, we might have a chance of repairing some of the damage that we've done.
And we're harvesting the lot. People are going to be eating differently and tasting different flavours, and woe and behold, well, there'll be a real Australian cuisine.
That's been here all along. There's nothing new about it in one way, is there?
Nothing new about it at all, but we ignored it. We turned our back on anything of Aboriginal provenance. Such was our sensitivity to the history of the country. It's time to embrace the history of the country, and with that we'll be able to embrace its food.
That's it for today. Thanks to Lorena Allam and Isabella Moore for their time. You can read Lorena's article about Bruce Pascoe and see some amazing photos of this trip and the new project right now at theguardian.com. This episode was produced by Joe Koning and Ellen Leabeater. Our executive producers are Miles Martignoni and Gabrielle Jackson. If you liked this episode, don't forget to leave a rating or a review. Okay, catch you tomorrow.
I should let you get back to it, Bruce, because it sounds like you've got a lot of work to do. What's the rest of the day like today?
We'll probably all go down the shed and look at a different method. Then, around about 6 o'clock, those who are living here will probably sit down and have a beer.
Sounds like a good day.
It is a good day, It's thrilling, Last night, we had some really heavy work to do in storing grain, It was just hard slog. And we sat down on the veranda and just slumped there, Even the dogs were tired and had a couple of beers, but totally at peace. Totally at peace with the world.